Okay, so I'm excited to be returning to my Jewish learning. I teach in many different groups of adults, and it's always a delight to teach Parsha, Torah portion, and also other classes like this. And let me just put the source sheet in before and a few other intro thoughts. So here's the source sheet. Bear with me. I'm opening the chat. Oh, and actually, let me just, I know you're going to say you don't have access to it. I just want to make it unrestricted. So I have to do that, and then you can click it again. Okay, so now anybody should be able to get into the doc, and I will make it private again after the session. So I'll ask that you just be judicious about sharing the presentation, and if you want a copy separately afterwards, I'll send you a copy. Okay, so I'm very excited and really feeling, I don't know, I feel like we're about to explore something that is maybe overlooked in Judaism and Jewish text, and I'm very excited to be exploring God as loving and love as a core value in Jewish tradition. And just bear with me, I want to be able to see more of you. There we go. And I hope I could spend the next 3 classes on this or more. So I'm sad actually to let go of this material for now after this class. Okay, so I have some handwritten notes actually, so you're going to see me look down a little bit and also look up at my second monitor, which is behind me. You'll see on the first page of the text here, there are a lot of kind of essential questions for consideration. I'm not going to read every single one of them right now, but what I want to say is 2 things. First of all, what got me thinking about God as love or God as loving, which you might be thinking about also in connection to Passover, and you might not even need an explanation about why I'm thinking about that. You may already know that during Passover, traditionally, Jews read Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, which is one of the most exquisite books of love poetry ever, in my opinion. And also, it's certainly in the Hebrew Bible. It's the only love poetry, really, in the Hebrew Bible. It's 8 chapters long. It's in the writing section. If you haven't read it yet, read it after this class. We'll see some excerpts today. But, you know, there's been a lot of commentary and interpretation about why we read the Song of Songs on Passover. And I'll share with you in a little bit the traditional explanation, and we'll see a little bit of that kind of trend in our tradition. But you know, in the holiday, where we generally think of the holiday as a holiday of freedom, which I'll talk about next week, but a holiday of freedom and a holiday of entering into a relationship with God, the question of why Shir HaShirim, why the Song of Songs on Passover is a big one, I think. So what I want to do is start with, we will get to our anchoring text, Shir HaShirim, but I want to start with some more general explorations about love in Jewish text and tradition, and I want us to really embrace the words of the Hebrew Bible here, the words of the prayers, and the core value of love that should be shining through for us. So, and I am going to try and pause after different sections. So I want to pause here and just take 1 or 2 brief reflections or questions just about that introduction about what we're about to do today.
Thank you. And I will say that we have 100 people here, which is lovely. Okay. So we are really looking forward to hearing from you. We don't have the ability to unmute ourselves. So if you are interested, please feel free to use the Zoom function to raise your hand and I can call on you. Or you're welcome to use the chat. I'll open the chat back up.
You don't have to have any questions now, but just before we move on. Okay, so we're going to move on.
We're warming up.
Oh, okay, good. So as you can see, I wanted to think with you for just a brief moment. There are multiple texts, not a plethora of texts, not a copious amount of texts, but multiple texts in the Hebrew Bible about God's love and God choosing the Israelites. So you'll see here in text number 1, the English is, I believe it's Everett Fox's translation. I mostly have the Jewish Publication Society translation in here. One of the things that will tip you off is that Everett Fox leaves God's name in here, Yud He Vav He, or YHWH, the 4-letter tetragrammaton in the text. I don't take it out. I usually try and take it out in the Hebrew, but I didn't manage to do that here. So I leave it in. So I'm gonna read this text out loud, and just I want us to think about chosenness and God's love for the Israelites. So in Deuteronomy, God says, or Moses really says, "For you are a people holy to God your God. It is you whom God, your God, chose for him as a treasured people from among all peoples that are on the face of the ground. Not because of your being many more than all other peoples, share, right. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I saw that. I'm sorry to interrupt. I will share my screen. Yes, thank you. Okay, Mara, I need to be able to share my screen.
Try now.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that should work. Okay, thank you so much for that. Okay, and I invite you to be in the document yourself if you need to resize it or anything like that. So for you are, I'm on verse 7, not because of your being many more than all the peoples has God attached God's self to you and chosen you, for you are the least numerous of all peoples. Rather, because of God's love for you and because of God's keeping the sworn oath that he swore to your fathers, did God take you out with a strong hand and redeem you from a house of serfs, from the hands of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Okay, a lot in this text, but what I want us to hone in on and really focus on is that according to the Deuteronomy text, God chose the Israelites as a treasured people. I'm going to offer 2 interpretations. One is because maybe God fell in love with the Israelites. The Israelites became a treasured people for him, but also because they were perhaps the weakest, the least numerous. Now, they could also be the least numerous and the strongest in some kind of circumstance, but there is this sense here that Israel is at a disadvantage. And certainly we'll talk about this when we talk about God of the stranger. We read throughout the whole Hebrew Bible, this idea that God took the Israelites out of Egypt, out of being enslaved in order to serve him. And then in many different ways, Israel is constantly obligated to remember that they were once slaves in Egypt and they must treat slaves and others with utmost dignity and respect. So for example, on Shabbat, one of the reasons given for keeping Shabbat in Deuteronomy is that the Israelites were slaves, and everyone in their household has to rest on Shabbat, not just them, even their slaves. So again, here there's the sense of love and chosenness. And I hope what screams through the text is this powerful sense of love. And in Hebrew, a treasured people is am segula. There's this very special, some kind of specialness that God feels for the Israelites. So I want to keep going a little bit here, and soon I'll pause for questions and reflections. In the daily prayers, there is a paragraph before the Shema called Ahavat Olam. And in case it's helpful to anyone, this Hebrew root here, Aleph Hey Bet, is the root for love. There are variations, and there are different words for love, as we'll see in Song of Songs and Shir HaShirim. But here I'm going to read this also, and I'm switch around the English a little bit. But this is said daily in the daily Jewish liturgy. With an eternal love have you loved your people Israel by teaching us the Torah and its commandments, laws and precepts, Therefore, God, our God, we shall meditate on your laws when we lie down and when we rise up, and we shall rejoice in the words of your Torah and your commandments forever, for they are our life and the length of our days, and we shall reflect upon them day and night. Oh, may you never remove your love from us, or for us. Blessed are you, God, who loves your people, Israel. So again, the sense of love really should be bursting through the text into our hearts, I think. And something else that I wanted to say just about the sense of love here. Yes, that not only do we have a sense of love and chosenness here, but one of the things I want us to think about in terms of God being loving, or love as a core value, is that love is tied up with obligation and responsibility. It's not just God loves you, you can do whatever you want. Sounds almost the converse, or a different aspect, a different angle on that is, it sounds very parenting. A parent doesn't say to a child, I love you so much, go do whatever you want. I mean, there's some footnotes there, but a parent says to a child, I love you so much, I'm going to protect you, I'm going to teach you about discipline and guidelines and rules, and of course you should grow up to be the person you want to be, and my job as a parent is to nurture you into that. But nevertheless, the love is tied up with responsibility. And so far we've read about God's love for the Israelites and responsibility, and now we see in text 3, this text might be familiar to many of you, taken from the Shema, which is a text from Deuteronomy. We are obligated to love God with all our heart, with all our being, with everything that we have. And there are signs that we're supposed to have in our lives of that love and of God's instructions and obligations toward us. So many different aspects. Again, we're going to get to Song of Songs soon. I want us to be anchored in different ways in Jewish tradition and text, to be thinking about the value of love and this core aspect of love in Jewish text and tradition. And this is a good time also, I want to mention, and I recently heard this listening to Rabbi Shai Held teach about love in Jewish text and tradition. Of course, and people might be wondering this, there are many texts in the Hebrew Bible and rabbinic texts as well about God as punishing and God as punitive and God as harsh. And I think this, I heard Shai say this so beautifully. So I'm paraphrasing some of his words, or I'm taking some of his words, I don't remember. I think in the end, for people who embrace sacred text, in the end, it's about what text we use to anchor us and as our starting point. And that's what I believe Shai said. It's this idea of having these texts as a starting point. And that's what I want us to immerse ourselves in today. Can these texts of love be a starting point, and perhaps texts of obligation? But I want us to be thinking about, of course, we're not blind to other aspects of Jewish text and tradition. Heaven forbid we should not look at things with open eyes. Heaven forbid. But what are the texts that we are going to use as contemporary, as moderns, that are our starting point? And I am suggesting that we immerse ourselves, at least today for this hour, in texts of love. One more piece here, two more pieces, and then I'm going to pause. Okay. Some of the next two texts, text 4 and 5, might be extremely familiar to you. I hope that I'll add a layer to them so that you perhaps think about them in new ways. So in Leviticus 19, in Vayikra Yud Tet, the third book of the Hebrew Bible, there is what scholars call the Holiness Code. Some of the middle chapters in Leviticus, really the core, the anchoring, the central texts of the Hebrew Bible, are about both ritual laws, ways in which the Israelites are commanded to be holy ritually, and also some of the most powerful guidelines about how to treat another person. So here in verses 17 and 18, we see, and I believe this is JPS translation, you shall not hate your kinsfolk, in your heart, your brother in your heart, your peer in your heart. Reprove your kinsmen, tell them when they did something wrong, but incur no guilt because of him. You should not take vengeance or bear a grudge against your countrymen, plural. Love your fellow as yourself, love your neighbor as yourself. I am God. So central, truly central to the whole Torah, central to the holiness code are these ideas about making sure you don't carry around a grudge, communicating appropriately, and acting from a place of love. Some scholars talk about, and the question is raised, well, can you really command love as a feeling? Probably not, and probably this is an expression of loyalty and or an expression of acting out of love. So your behavior should be guided by love. But I think we can read into the text a little bit here that perhaps we are being commanded to cultivate feelings of love. Okay, and then text number 5 here. Also a text that might be well known to you, but in the context of love as a core value, I want us to read these words and let them wash over us. The context of this is there are a few texts in the Babylonian Talmud from about 550 CE in the tractate, the section on Shabbat, page 31a, about converts coming to the sages of the house of Hillel and Shammai. These are pre-rabbinic sages, not rabbis themselves, but sages from before the destruction of the temple in 70 CE, a marker in Jewish history between, intellectually speaking, there was a sage class, there were sages and we have records of sages and what they said. And then post 70 CE, the ancient rabbis, we have many documents from the ancient rabbis, but this is a late text dated to an early time. So there was another incident involving a Gentile who came before Shammai and said to Shammai, who was known to be more strict than Hillel, convert me on the condition that you teach me the entire Torah while I'm standing on one foot. Shammai pushed him away with the builder's cubit in his hand. And the explanation here from Sepharia, this was a common measuring stick and Shammai was a builder by trade. Sepharia is a common website where you can find a plethora of Jewish texts, and the bold is a direct translation from the Talmud, the ancient rabbinic text, and what's not bold is a little bit of an explanation. The same Gentile then came before Hillel. He converted him right away, no question, and said to him, that which is hateful to you, do not do to another. That's the entire Torah. The rest is interpretation. Now go study. And in Aramaic, it's fun to read this, not as well known, Zil Gmor. It almost sounds like Yiddish. Zil Gmor. Go study. So what we have here so far, in addition to what we read about love of God for us, love that we're being asked to cultivate for God, love between our peers, we're literally being told that love is a core value. We don't have to just read it out of the text. We can read it right here in the text. Love your fellow as yourself. And even from an outsider, from an objective perspective, when someone comes to a Jewish sage and says, like, what's this all about? The sage says it's about interpersonal behavior. It's the other stuff, yeah, go study it and presumably go do it. What's it really about? It's really about how we treat each other. A message that is not easy, even though we talk about it a lot. For most of us, I would say it's not that easy to remember all the time. So before we go on to the Song of Songs text and talk more about gleaning a God of love from the Song of Songs, as the ancient rabbis did, are there questions or reflections, and I'll take up to 3 at this moment about these texts that we've read so far about love as a pillar of a value in Jewish text and tradition. And of course, there don't have to be. I'm going to scroll a little bit, but Mara, you'll let me know. Or if I see someone's raised hand, I can call on that person.
I really encourage people to raise their hands. We'd love to hear your voices, but we do have a few comments in the chat, Abby.
Okay, great.
Well, one, someone says this is their favorite Hillel and Shammai story, so that's a good place to start. That was a little bit earlier. This is sort of big, and
okay,
maybe there's a way to tie this in also, but
okay.
Why would the Jews or the Israelites liberated from slavery then go ahead and have slaves of their own?
Yes, no, I'm prepared for that question.
Okay, great.
I knew I didn't address it in the moment. Okay, so here's the thing, and I don't have a great answer, but this is the answer, or at least my answer for right now. In let's just say anywhere between 1000 BCE and 500 BCE, having slaves was an acceptable way of operating in the world. There's no excuse that we can make for that. We don't believe in slavery now, for the most part. At least I don't believe in slavery now. But in the Hebrew Bible, we see slavery was an institution. However, there are many laws in the Hebrew Bible about the ways in which slaves should be treated ethically. So in Egypt, it is clear that the Israelites, or the Hebrews, were not treated ethically at all. As you may recall, at the very beginning of the book of Exodus, when the initial request is made to Pharaoh to liberate the Hebrews, he enslaves them with a deeper level of slavery. The Israelites have to go and collect their materials for building after that. So there's a vengefulness, there's an abuse. In the Hebrew Bible, there are a plethora of laws, and there are in other ancient Near Eastern texts also, but in the Hebrew Bible, there are ways in which the writers address what does it mean to, yes, have slaves, but to to be a master of slaves who behaves with an ethic and with an ethic and laws that are understood to be commanded by God. So, the Bible was written more than a couple thousand years ago. It was a different time. So that may not be a comforting answer, but there's only so much we can't always apologize for our ancestors' behavior and writings.
Thank you. And I hope that was a helpful answer to Dorothea. Sure. The chat is now open. Please, let's keep whatever comments we have to the material, what you've been doing, but we'll get to them as we go.
Okay, so if there isn't one more reflection or question, I'm gonna move forward. Okay. So here we are. I think in a way coming to more complex material, coming to the Song of Songs. And what I want us to do is read a couple of excerpts here. Over the years, I've chosen different excerpts at different times. It's hard to choose just a few texts, but in the end, what I chose here are two short-ish texts in which the woman speaks, and I'll give some context in a moment. And text 8 is the man speaking to the woman. So let me say that much ink has been spilled about the sort of mystery that the Song of Songs presents to us. There are it almost feels dreamlike to read it. I'm not the first one to say that. There are multiple setting changes. The couple the man and the woman are in the vineyard. The woman is in the city. They're in a bedroom. There's a pastoral setting, an agricultural setting. There are multiple settings. It is thought that some of the material is as old, it could be as old as 1000 BCE, but the final writing of the text with some late Hebrew language is thought to be perhaps the 200s BCE. So the poetry here could span a very long time. Mostly, and I think refreshingly and fascinatingly, it is the woman who speaks in this text. And interestingly, she is the one mostly like she's wandering around and cannot find her lover. There are some moments where the lovers come together, but the book actually offers no resolution, and the lovers are not together when the book ends. So I really encourage reading it, and it is confusing. In fact, in the Jewish Study Bible, which I use as sort of my core go-to when I study Torah, I even have noted woman speaking, man speaking, woman speaking, man speaking, because it is very confusing. So I encourage you to read the text carefully. And if you don't, by the way, if you don't already have a Jewish Study Bible at home, I highly recommend the one edited by Brettler and Berlin. Incredible and helpful notes in many contexts. So we're going to read these texts here, see the poetry, and then what I want us to do is explore the way the rabbis have interpreted this text and think about when we think about reading the Song of Songs on Passover and the love that emerges from it, whether it's the erotic love, the romantic love, the love that the rabbis understood to be between the Israelites and God, what is most meaningful and resonant for us? And then what does that all mean? So here we go with some texts. And I'm going to ask if anyone, and I should say the JPS translation is on the left, the Robert Alter translation is in the middle. Would anyone, I'm going to ask if there's anyone who would like to read texts 6 and 7, and then possibly 8.
I know we're still warming up, but yay, thank you, Hannah. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Okay, start with
text 6.
But read just the left.
English. Choose one of the English. Yeah, choose.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to actually suggest you read the middle column.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Okay.
Good.
Draw me after you. Let us run. The king has brought me to his chamber. Let us be glad and rejoice in you. Let us extol your loving beyond wine. Rightly do they love you. He has brought me to the house of wine, and his banner over me is love. Stay me up with raisin cakes, cushion me with quinces, for I am in a swoon of love. His left hand beneath my head, his right hand embracing me.
Okay, and Hannah, you can also read text 8 if that works for you.
You have captured my heart, my sister bride. You have captured my heart with one glance of your eyes, with one bead of your necklace. How beautiful your loving, my sister bride. How much better your loving than wine, and the scent of your unguents than all perfumes. Nectar your lips drip, bride. Honey and milk are under your tongue, and the scent of your orbs like Lebanon's scent.
Okay, Hannah, thank you so much. What, Hannah, did you say something?
Is that, so I noticed in the JPS it says the scent of your robes.
Sorry, that's my typo. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I typed the altar. You can't find the altar online. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So there's one more piece here. I'm going to jump below just to show you to text. I'm just going to read text 12 also, just text 12, and then go back up a little bit. So this is another text of the of either the man seeking the woman or the woman seeking the man. I think you could interpret it either way in the text itself. So, oh my dove, in the cranny of the rocks, hidden by the cliff, let me see your face. Let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your face is comely. We'll talk a little bit more about that text, but just, I hope these, I feel like maybe we should have read more texts from Song of Songs, but these texts I hope give you a feel, a taste of the symbolism and the eroticism in Song of Songs. The woman is speaking beautifully about the man is speaking beautifully about the woman, and the text goes on in many different ways about this. So I want to actually pause here and share with you that one of the explanations, the two most popular explanations given for why this erotic material is read on Passover. One is that springtime is often thought of as a season of love and renewal and rebirth, and there's a very strong sense of nature here, and also it's a text full of love. But the rabbis took this multiple steps further and essentially most likely basing their interpretation on other biblical texts that speak of God as husband and the woman, the Israelites, as his wife. Some of the texts are very disturbing, and in the context of the prophetic reprimand about the way that the Israelites have behaved, worshiping other gods, there are a lot of pretty disturbing texts. However, and I did not really quote those today. What I did share with you is one text from Hosea, who centers a lot of his words around this relationship between God and the Israelites as husband and wife. Is God taking back God's wife after to kind of go to the symbolism here for a moment, after exile and after destruction, God takes back God's wife, God takes back Israel as God's people. So there is this disturbing sense that God has punished the Israelites and now God is taking the people back. That is there. And again, I'm not going to deny it, but for our purposes today, you're welcome to email me about it. Certainly, I know if you're hearing it for the first time, it can be very disturbing. But I do want to focus on the parts of the text that are beautiful and that speak to a loving relationship. So in Hosea here, I'm going to read verses 16, 17, and 18. So Hosea, speaking for God, says, "Assuredly, I will speak coaxingly to her and lead her through the wilderness and speak to her tenderly. I will give her vineyards from there and the valley of Achor as a plowland of hope. There shall she respond in the days of her youth, as in the days of her youth, when she came up from the lands of Egypt. And in that day, declares the Lord, you will call me Ishi, my man or my husband, and no more will you call me Baali, my master," which in Hebrew, Baal can also mean husband. So there are multiple texts like this, and the rabbis really, and I'm going to skip texts 11 and 10 and 11 for the moment, the rabbis really focus on Song of Songs in a huge amount of commentary as symbolic of God and the Jewish people. The man is usually, not all the time, usually considered God, and the Israelites, the woman is usually considered the Jewish people. So we're going to read a little bit of Song of Songs Rabbah, which is the Midrash, the rabbinic interpretation and theology expressed here on the verse that we read above about, most likely this is the man speaking, but I think could be interpreted as the woman too. The man saying like, "Where are you, my woman, my lover? Are you hiding? You're a dove and you seem to be hiding. Let me see your face. Let me hear your voice. Your voice is sweet." So we're going to see how the rabbis understand this verse. So Rabbi Akiva, who was a fan of Song of Songs, and if we have time, we'll go back to the texts above, he decoded or understood the verse, not as a literal verse about a man and a woman, but as the hour that the Israelites stood before Mount Sinai, where they received the 10 Commandments, experienced a revelation, for they were hidden in the hiding places at Sinai. And now Rabbi Akiva, as the rabbis do, are going to use two verses, juxtapose them, and make an interpretation. "Let me see your face" from the Song of Songs is just like, Rabbi Akiva says, and all the people saw the voices. So Rabbi Akiva is saying This verse, let me see your face from Song of Songs, should be reminding us, and in fact has meaning particular to the Mount Sinai experience, where the people see God's voices. Let me hear your voice. This is the voice from before the commandments, for it says, all that you say we will do and we will hear. So all that's happening here is Rabbi Akiva is taking specific words, and of course those words are very likely going to appear in other texts, here in Exodus and Deuteronomy, in the context of receiving the Torah, or right before the Torah is received. Rabbi Akiva says, it must be that the Song of Songs is actually talking about the Sinai experience, since there are these duplicative words. And then this is not a duplicative word, but a duplicative idea. For your voice is sweet. This is the voice after the commandments, as it says, God has heard the voice of your speaking. That which you have said is goodly. And in Hebrew, it's a form of tov, which means good. So here we have Song of Songs, and this is just a snippet from the way in which the rabbis understand the Song of Songs is not about a man and a woman experiencing erotic love, but about the forming of a unique and loving connection between God and the Israelites. And just to show you one more piece here, which is a little bit different, rather than the Sinai experience, the formative revelation experience, we have something a little bit different. And this is an excerpt, as I wrote from a long drash, a long explication. The school of Rabbi Yishmael taught, when the Israelites departed Egypt, to what were they compared? To what are they comparable? To a dove that was fleeing a hawk and entered into the crevice of a rock. What did the dove do? It began shrieking and striking itself with its wings so that the owner of the dove would come and rescue it. This is what the Israelites were analogous to at the sea. They were unable to descend into the sea because the sea had not yet been split for them. What did they do? When the children of Israel cried out before the Holy One, blessed be He, immediately God saved Israel on that day. So Rabbi Yishmael's school is understanding the symbolism in the Song of Songs, and in particular in this verse where the dove is hiding, the woman is hiding, is not actually the Israelites hiding at the beginning of the Sinai experience, but actually hiding because they were afraid of crossing the Red Sea. And then God came in and allowed them to cross the Red Sea. And eventually the dove comes out of hiding and unites with her lover, as Rabbi Yishmael understands God. So these are two examples of how the rabbis understand Song of Songs, really, again, not about the relationship between the man and the woman, but about the relationship between God and the Israelites. So what I want to kind of explore with you here is not only like which is more meaningful. Is it meaningful to think about the Song of Songs as simply we read it in the springtime to acknowledge that the springtime is a time of love and a time of rebirth, a time where we wear perhaps less clothing outside than we might. We're not all bundled up. We're freer. We're more in touch with our physicality. And maybe that made the rabbis uncomfortable. And so they interpreted this in a different way, that the Song of Songs is very much so about the close, the loving relationship. It's all symbolism about the loving relationship between God and the Israelites. So you can think about, well, which one is more meaningful to me? And if people have a thought, I want to pause here before I kind of try and offer a different either or perspective and see, is there one perspective that resonates with you over the other? So we'll take one or two responses.
We're a friendly group. We don't bite.
Okay, if people don't necessarily want to share, are there clarification questions or?
Someone just wrote in the chat.
Okay.
Describing God's love for and relationship with the Jewish people is very anthropomorphic. how can this be made meaningful to those of us who have difficulty with an anthropomorphic understanding of God? Great question.
Yes, great question. Yes. Okay, so I will address that shortly. Before I do, thank you for asking, to whomever asked that. So, and actually, I hear whoever asked that. Mara, can you share the name of the person if that's okay?
I would love
Unless
to.
they asked anonymously.
It is an iPad. iPad
okay.
5.
Okay, so whoever asked that question, thank you for asking it, and certainly we will address that in a moment.
So
Okay.
also in the chat, there's questions about who wrote the Song of Songs or who is said to have written Song of Songs.
Yeah, okay, great. We do not know who wrote the Song of Songs. We do know that it's different stages of Hebrew poetry, anywhere from as early as 1000 BCE to about 200 BCE, maybe a little bit earlier, but we do not know who wrote it.
Hannah, who I believe was who read earlier, so lovely, thank you, has a thought.
Okay, great.
Hi.
Hi, Hannah.
So here's how I think of the divine. I think and the most direct way I experience, my dog is always happy to see me. And I think of the divine as whatever it is that inspires love in a dog. That's the force that I think of as the divine force. And for me, that is love. And I actually look at all of the stuff about a punishing God as that's the human overlay. But the love is that's what I believe also.
Okay.
That the love, it's the source of love. And we understand it as in human terms of punishment and reward, but that's not what it is actually about. So for me, this makes perfect sense. This
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Hannah. Okay. So what I want to offer now is I want to speak to, like, Hannah beautifully offered an interpretation that makes sense for her and resonates for her. And I want us to do that, to try and do that in different ways for each of us. So I want to point out here before I offer a couple of interpretations is that notice that Rabbi Akiva says that the whole world is not as worthy as the day on which the Song of Songs was given. For all the writings are holy, but the Song of Songs is holy of holies, Kodesh HaKadoshim. And in the Hebrew Bible, what that refers to is in the sanctuary, the traveling sanctuary through the desert, the innermost compartment was called the Holy of Holies. Rabbi Akiva is saying, certainly all our scrolls, all our books are sacred, but the Song of Songs was particularly sacred. So, and then in another text, he says, the one who, I don't actually know how to say this word correctly, warbles their voice when they recite the Song of Songs, when they're in a feasting hall, and makes it like a song, and that person has no share in the world to come. The Song of Songs was often thought of, some scholars do think of it, as poetry used during a wedding. In fact, one of the most famous lines here, Ani lidodi v'dodi li, I am my beloved and my beloved is mine. That's used in ketubot and Jewish wedding documents and on jewelry and in art. But Rabbi Akiva, I want us to anchor our conversation for the moment in that there's something unique about this song. But Rabbi Akiva does not want us to think about it necessarily as something that reflects erotic love. I'm going to go back to the question earlier about how do we think of it if we do not think of it as as this rabbinic anthropomorphizing of God and the Israelites. So I want us to think back for a moment about to what we did earlier and think about the ways in which our text is asking us to think about love as a love coming from the universe, from God, from a higher power, a love that we embrace, that we feel when we walk out into the world each day, a love that we cultivate in our own hearts for the world, the universe, God, and a love that we cultivate between us and hopefully as much as we can, to the extent that we can, each person we encounter, and love as a core pillar, a core value or a pillar in Jewish text. That's where we started. I want to suggest that what Shir HaShirim does is asks us to deepen the interpersonal love. It's not just about v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself, and that itself has so many. We could spend a whole session on unpacking possibilities for what that means. However, it seems to me that the Song of Songs asks us to start with, as radical or as out there, I don't know as it sounds, it asks us to start with romantic love, erotic love, not just a regular love between two people, but a deep love. And I'm going to say here, I don't think that we should take this to mean that we all have to go out and, engage in physical activity that doesn't feel right to us, or make the center of our lives erotic love. But I am suggesting that Song of Songs, in the context of Passover, in the context of the Israelites forming a new relationship with God, or God and the Israelites entering into a covenant, or the Israelites beginning to build their own society. You can even take God out of it as you see, I started to do a little bit. In terms of a society and thinking about what should guide our actions and our feelings every day, I think that our texts are suggesting it's love, but not only, I don't know, a regular kind of love, but a very deep kind of love. Some here may have heard of the way in which the Jewish philosopher Martin Buber talks about the I-thou relationship. One might say that Song of Songs, in the context of beginning a new relationship with God, or the Israelites forming a new kind of society, or are commemorating that time period in the Jewish story, we are being asked to think about, what does it mean to walk out into the world with love, to feel love, to embrace love, but also to deepen our connection with others in a loving way. And I want to also suggest that not only do I think that reading the Song of Songs on Passover, Shir HaShirim on Pesach, is asking us to think about deep love and really genuinely cultivating a sense of love in the world and what that would mean for each of us if we worked on that more. But also, I want us to take a look at this quote here from Alana Pardes, who wrote a beautiful book called The Song of Songs, a biography. So I'm going to read that, and then I'm going to offer another interpretation also. All allegories of the song rely on the fluidity of love as an emotion that may be experienced in entirely different realms. Love, after all, is not limited to human relations or single modality. Within the context of the biblical world, the term love, ahav, appears in tales of human love, as well as in the momentous commandment to love God. Such love for the divine surely differs from the interpersonal bonds, but is regarded as having the same kind of intensity. That love in the song is total love based on absolute commitment. There are no, this was an autocorrect. There are no other competing suitors and no other enticing maidens in the vineyards. This made it all the more compelling for allegorists. They could easily imagine the lovers of the song as loving each other with all their heart and with all their being and with all their might. That is a quote from the Deuteronomy text of the Shema, where the Israelites are being commanded to love God in those ways. Alana Pardes and Michael Fishbane, who wrote a massive commentary on Song of Songs, both talk about, and I'm suggesting also, the way in which I'm going to ask it in a question. I think they're asking us to think about, and they're suggesting, and I'm taking it a step further, that we read the Song of Songs on Passover in the context of this new relationship and a new kind of society, to think about a question that maybe we in contemporary times don't think about enough. What does it mean to anchor ourselves in the texts of love, not only strict covenant, strict responsibility, as we sometimes think about when we think about Jewish text and covenant and Passover, but also what does it mean to anchor ourselves in love? And what does it mean not only to anchor ourselves in, and I keep saying the word regular, in sort of in a day-to-day kind of love, what does it mean to deepen our sense of love every day? What does it mean going into Passover and taking the many messages of Passover? What does it mean not only to think about God or the universe as loving, but what does it mean for us to think about how do we take the sense of covenant and build from it relationships with others based in love, not just romantic love, not just erotic love, but a deep sense of love? What would it mean if every day we kind of caught ourselves, if we found ourselves resentful, if we found ourselves in a situation that we weren't feeling a lot of love, and said, no, wait, let me think about these texts, or let me just, if I'm not thinking about these texts for a moment, let me think about what would it mean if I approached this situation differently? What would it mean if I loved myself more deeply in this situation? What would it mean if I loved this difficult family member more in this situation, this difficult colleague, or this colleague I experience is difficult? So again, bringing all the texts that we did together today, thinking about reading them in the context of Passover, when the Israelites enter into a relationship with God, or the Israelites begin to create this new kind of society with new kinds of guidelines and laws. What does it mean? Reading Song of Songs on Passover think about, what does it mean to think about all of that in the context of love, and to deepen our own practice of love with one another. So I'm going to pause here. We have a few minutes left, and I'm going to see, are there any responses, reflections, questions, clarifications in these last few minutes? And please feel free to take a moment, look through the doc.
Paula, I see that you have a hand raised. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Personally, I love Passover, so that's the first thing I have to say.
Me too.
I think it's fantastic to look at this holiday out of the context of the rules of, and look at it in terms of the love of. And for me, it's not either or, it's yes and. So I think if we look at the story as new beginnings, and all we need is love. I mean, and to pray, Lynn Miranda says, love is love is love. If we looked at this holiday with love, period, perhaps we wouldn't get caught up in whether we put tinfoil in our kitchen and whether the switching of the dishes is the essence of the holiday, as opposed to what really matters at this time. And as a lay leader in my synagogue, which is a very small congregation in Northern Canada, people get caught about the fact that they may not be able to buy matzah and miss the whole thing about what this is all about. And I think looking at this text tells us that all of these things are yes and that you can, there's nothing wrong with looking at it someday as erotic love. Whee, fun, yay. Let's look at it as love of God because I feel that way today. Yay. Let's look at it as the changing of the seasons because I feel that way today. It's not a box.
Okay, great.
It's a ripple in a pond.
Paula, thank you so very much for everything you said, and in particular, the yes and, which is, I think, very modern, very contemporary. You know, many of us, I think, don't want to, we want to embrace it all. We don't want to say, it's not this, it's that. We want to say, no, let's take it all in. And in fact, that's what Alana Pardes says here. And that's what I quoted another scholar, Michael Fishbane, who wrote the JPS commentary on Song of Songs. So we'll take one more. Hannah, I do see that you're raising your hands, but I do want to see if there's anyone who hasn't yet shared a reflection, a question, a clarification. And I can't see everyone for some reason. I can't even scroll through. I can only see some of you. I don't know why, but is there anyone who hasn't yet shared a thought, a question that might want to add their voice to our learning time together today?
I just asked Marcia to unmute. So we have 1 minute left, Marcia, so no pressure, but we'd love to hear from you.
Okay, just a quick pushback on Paula. For all the songs, remember there's also the very famous one, love is just a 4-letter word. So my question went back, and I know someone else mentioned it in the chat, when you said love comes with obligation and responsibility. I personally am more comfortable with the word loyalty rather than obligation. And I think that when we have a covenant, whether that be a ketubah, whether that be the acceptance at Sinai, whatever, that's where the obligation steps in. So it's the loyalty to the loyalty that would reflect our core values. If I am loyal, I am loyal in love, both to myself and to those whom I can love. So
Very
I find
interesting.
So covenantal love comes with obligation, at least as far as I'm understanding it, and that's a mutual acceptance. Whereas love in general, if there's a way to say general, comes with responsibility and loyalty.
Okay, beautiful. Marsha, thank you so much. Yeah, I would say again, I'm gonna do a yes and here, you know, in our last minute without being able to really dive in. And Marsha, thank you for raising all those things. I think I mentioned earlier, oftentimes love in the Torah on a pshat level, on a truly ancient Near Eastern Hebrew Bible context-based meaning, love does mean loyalty. So I would say it slightly differently, out of love and loyalty, for us modern readers, does come a sense of obligation. And that being said, again, Marsha, taking what you said about love and obligation, as we, you know, we're going to have, I hope we'll all be together, many of us will be together again as we embrace other aspects of Passover. This is just one, even though, again, I'm going to be sad to say goodbye to this particular set of learnings. The idea of love in connection to covenant is a powerful one. And I think that that's what it comes down to for us in terms of why we read Song of Songs on Passover. We do see the Israelites beginning to enter into a covenant with God, and yet we also read this incredible love poetry. So yes, and we have both those aspects of obligation and love to think about on Passover as we enter into Passover time. And next week, we'll be thinking more about covenant and freedom, and the freedom to choose and to be in a covenant. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. I'll let Mara wrap up, but really thank you so much for participating and for being present with us today.
Yes, thank you. I'll just echo that. We loved hearing from you as participants. And Abby, thank you so much for leading our conversation today. I hope to see you all next week at the same time, and via the same link, we'll reach out to you with the recording from today's session and a reminder for next week. See you soon. Bye-bye.